Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to discuss a topic that holds immense power in the art of living, the power of silence. We often underestimate how important it is to speak, but even more crucial is understanding when to remain silent. In life, there are moments when words can do more harm than good, and silence speaks louder than anything we could ever say. Silence when you're angry, we all know that feeling. The surge of emotion when anger takes over, when frustration reaches its peak. But this is precisely when silence becomes a shield. In the heat of the moment, our words are often sharp, unfiltered, and can leave scars. So instead of speaking, take a step back, breathe, and let the silence calm your storm. It gives us the space to reflect, to avoid regret, and to preserve relationships. In moments of intense anger, the natural impulse is often to lash out with words, to express our frustration or hurt, to make our emotions known. However, the power of silence in these moments cannot be overstated. Anger, when left unchecked, can cloud our judgment and distort our thoughts, turning simple misunderstandings into conflicts that may not have existed otherwise. This is why silence becomes such a powerful tool in times of anger. It offers a brief yet crucial pause. A moment to regain control, to reflect, and to avoid the regret of saying something we later wish we hadn't. When we're angry, our emotions are heightened, and our minds may not be clear. It's easy to become so consumed by the moment that we speak before we think. But the words spoken in anger are often sharp and cutting, leaving behind a trail of hurt and damage. These words can scar relationships, damage reputations, and create rifts that are difficult to repair. A fleeting moment of anger can lead to hours, days, or even years of regret. This is why it is essential to recognize when silence is the best response, not just for the sake of the conversation at hand, but for our own well-being and peace of mind. In the heat of the moment, silence can serve as a shield, a way to protect ourselves from saying something we may not mean. Anger tends to trigger a fight or flight response, and our first instinct may be to retaliate, to defend ourselves, or to win the argument. But the truth is, many of the things we say in the heat of anger are not a true reflection of our thoughts or beliefs. They are simply an outburst of emotion. By remaining silent, we give ourselves the opportunity to cool down, to take a step back, and to gain a clearer perspective on the situation. In doing so, we avoid escalating the conflict or making things worse. Moreover, silence in moments of anger allows us to gain control over our emotions. Anger, when left unchecked, can quickly spiral out of control, leading us to say things we don't truly mean. When we remain silent, we take back control of our reactions. We choose to pause, to breathe, and to give ourselves time to process the situation before we respond. This pause gives us the opportunity to assess whether our anger is justified and whether it's worth addressing in the first place. It's a way to avoid reacting impulsively and instead choose a response that is thoughtful, measured, and ultimately more productive. Furthermore, silence in times of anger fosters better communication in the long run. When we speak in anger, we're often not listening to the other person. Our minds are too clouded by our own emotions to truly hear what the other person is saying, and this lack of understanding can further fuel the fire. Silence, however, allows space for both parties to reflect on the situation and gives them an opportunity to articulate their thoughts more clearly. It provides a moment for empathy to take root, helping us to understand where the other person is coming from and allowing for a more compassionate and effective conversation later on. In relationships, whether personal or professional, the ability to remain silent in moments of anger can be transformative. It can prevent minor disagreements from turning into major conflicts and protect us from saying things that could damage our relationships permanently. Sometimes, the most powerful way to communicate during a conflict is through silence. Instead of arguing, instead of raising our voices, silence offers the chance to calm our minds and approach the situation with a clearer, more open heart. Of course, silence doesn't mean avoiding the issue altogether. It doesn't mean bottling up our feelings or pretending that the problem doesn't exist. On the contrary, silence in moments of anger is about choosing the right time to address the issue. It's about not reacting in the heat of the moment, but rather waiting for a time when we can communicate more effectively. It's about choosing peace over confrontation, understanding over judgment, and resolution over escalation. In conclusion, the power of silence in moments of anger is immeasurable. By remaining silent, we allow ourselves to regain control of our emotions, to reflect on the situation, and to avoid saying things we may later regret. Silence gives us the space to cool down, to think clearly, and to approach the situation with a calm and compassionate mindset. It protects our relationships, promotes better communication, and ultimately helps us navigate the inevitable conflicts that arise in life with grace and wisdom. Jealousy is a powerful and often destructive emotion that can seep into our thoughts and actions without us even realizing it. It arises from feelings of insecurity, comparison, and a sense of inadequacy. When we feel jealous, we may begin to question our own worth, measure our success against others, or feel as though we are missing out on something that others have. In these moments, the temptation to speak or act on these emotions is strong. However, remaining silent in the face of jealousy can be one of the most effective ways to protect our mental well-being and nurture our relationships. The first reason silence is so important when we feel jealous is that it prevents us from saying things we might regret. When jealousy takes over, it often clouds our judgment and distorts our perception of reality. We may begin to see the other person's success or happiness as a reflection of our own failure. This distorted thinking can lead us to make hurtful comments, either directly to the person we're jealous of or to others around us. In these moments, our words might be fueled by insecurity or resentment rather than truth, and they can have lasting negative effects. By choosing silence, we create space between our initial emotional reaction and our eventual response, allowing ourselves time to reflect and avoid the urge to lash out. Moreover, silence in the face of jealousy helps us to protect our self-esteem. When we allow jealousy to control us, it can cause us to focus on our perceived shortcomings, ignoring all of the positive qualities and achievements that make us unique. This self-criticism can be deeply damaging, leading to a negative self-image and a lack of confidence. In these moments, speaking, whether it's to the person we're jealous of or to others, may serve to reinforce those feelings of inadequacy. But silence allows us to step back from these destructive thoughts and remind ourselves of our own worth. It creates space for self-reflection, allowing us to focus on our own journey and recognize that everyone is on their own path. Silence also allows us to gain a clearer perspective on the situation at hand. When jealousy arises, our perception of events can become distorted. We may look at someone else's success or happiness and feel as though they have something we'll never attain, or that they are somehow more deserving than we are. This comparison is rarely productive and often only serves to fuel our jealousy further. By remaining silent, we give ourselves the opportunity to step away from this negative mindset and reassess the situation. We can ask ourselves whether the jealousy is truly justified or whether we are simply projecting our own insecurities onto someone else's achievements. In doing so, we gain a more balanced and rational understanding of the situation, which helps to diffuse the intensity of our jealousy. In addition, silence in moments of jealousy fosters empathy and understanding. Jealousy can often lead to feelings of resentment, making it difficult to be happy for others when they experience success. But when we choose to remain silent, we create space for empathy to emerge. Instead of immediately reacting with envy or bitterness, silence gives us the time to reflect on the other person's journey. We may come to understand the hard work, dedication, and sacrifices that have gone into their success, which can help us to feel inspired rather than threatened. By choosing silence, we allow ourselves to celebrate others' victories and to see them as opportunities for growth rather than threats to our own sense of self-worth. Furthermore, silence helps to preserve our relationships during moments of jealousy. When we express jealousy through words or actions, we risk damaging our connections with others. People can sense when we are envious, and this can lead to tension or misunderstandings. Silence, however, can act as a safeguard. Rather than allowing jealousy to create friction, silence gives us the opportunity to process our emotions privately and to approach the situation with grace and maturity. It prevents us from saying things that might create unnecessary conflict and instead allows us to approach the person we're jealous of with kindness and respect. Finally, choosing silence in the face of jealousy can be an act of self-control and emotional maturity. It takes strength to acknowledge jealousy and to resist the impulse to react impulsively. It requires us to recognize the emotion for what it is, a temporary feeling that doesn't need to dictate our actions. In moments when jealousy arises, silence is a form of self-discipline, a way of managing our emotions and choosing a path that leads to growth and peace rather than bitterness and resentment. In conclusion, jealousy is a complex emotion that can be difficult to manage, but silence offers a powerful tool for dealing with it. By remaining silent in moments of jealousy, we give ourselves the opportunity to reflect on our feelings, protect our self-esteem, and gain a clearer perspective on the situation. Silence allows us to foster empathy, preserve our relationships, and approach jealousy with maturity and emotional control. Instead of letting jealousy drive us to speak or act impulsively, we can use silence to find peace, to learn from others, and to focus on our own growth and happiness. Criticism is an essential part of personal growth and improvement, whether it's self-criticism or feedback from others. However, it is crucial to understand that the way we deliver criticism can determine whether it helps or harms. Often, we may feel the urge to point out someone's flaws or mistakes immediately, thinking we are doing them a favor by highlighting their shortcomings. However, without considering the manner in which we express our opinions, criticism can quickly transform into a weapon rather than a tool for constructive feedback. This is why silence, especially when we are in the position of criticizing others, can be one of the most valuable responses. The first reason silence is powerful when we are tempted to criticize is that it gives us time to reflect on our intentions. When we feel the need to offer criticism, we often do so with the best of intentions, to help the other person improve or to prevent them from making a mistake. However, in the heat of the moment, our words can become more about expressing our frustration than offering genuine, constructive feedback. Sometimes when we feel the impulse to criticize, we should pause and ask ourselves, am I saying this to help the other person, or am I saying it because I am frustrated? By choosing silence, we give ourselves time to reflect on the purpose of our words and whether they are truly intended to build up the other person, or if they are being fueled by negative emotions. In addition, silence allows us to assess whether the criticism is even necessary in the first place. There are many situations in life where people may make mistakes, but those mistakes may not be significant enough to warrant criticism. In these cases, silence becomes a powerful choice. Instead of pointing out every minor flaw, remaining silent allows us to pick our battles. Not everything needs to be addressed, and sometimes withholding criticism can be more beneficial to the relationship and the person involved. Instead of focusing on the negative, we can choose to highlight the positive or simply let the situation go, understanding that everyone makes mistakes and that not every mistake requires correction. Moreover, silence when criticizing prevents us from saying things that could cause unnecessary harm. Criticism, when delivered in a harsh or unkind way, can deeply wound the recipient. In moments of frustration, we may be tempted to speak without thinking, and our words may be more cutting than we intended. Silence in these instances offers a moment to cool down and reconsider the impact of our words. It allows us to recognize that there is a difference between being honest and being hurtful. By remaining silent, we prevent ourselves from adding to the person's distress and instead create space for a more thoughtful and compassionate response later on. Another powerful aspect of silence in these situations is that it gives the other person room to reflect on their own actions. Sometimes, when we criticize someone, we may unintentionally take away their opportunity to learn from their mistakes on their own. We assume they need our guidance, but in doing so, we may inadvertently prevent them from figuring things out independently. By remaining silent, we allow the other person the space to reflect on their actions, process the situation, and decide for themselves what they could do differently. This can lead to more meaningful personal growth and development as the person comes to their own conclusions rather than being told what to do. Silence also allows us to offer feedback in a more constructive and productive way. When we hold back criticism in the heat of the moment, it provides an opportunity to approach the situation more thoughtfully. Rather than reacting impulsively, we can take time to frame our thoughts and offer feedback that is both honest and encouraging. A well-timed and well-thought-out criticism can have a far greater impact than a rushed or emotionally charged comment. By remaining silent initially, we set the stage for a more positive and impactful conversation when we are ready to address the issue at hand. Furthermore, silence helps preserve the relationship by reducing the potential for conflict. Criticism, particularly if it is not delivered with care, can quickly escalate into an argument. People may become defensive, and instead of improving, the relationship may be strained. By choosing silence, we avoid contributing to unnecessary conflict and allow for a more measured and respectful conversation when the time is right. Silence prevents the situation from becoming a battle of egos and instead opens the door to a more harmonious and collaborative dialogue. Finally, silence can foster a sense of empathy and understanding. When we are tempted to criticize, we often fail to consider the circumstances the other person is facing. We may not be aware of the challenges or struggles that have led to their mistakes or shortcomings. By choosing silence, we give ourselves the chance to step back and consider the broader picture. We may come to realize that the person is doing their best in a difficult situation, and that a more empathetic approach would be more helpful than offering unsolicited criticism. Silence allows us to approach the situation with more compassion and understanding, which ultimately benefits both parties. In conclusion, silence in moments when we feel the urge to criticize is not about avoiding the truth or suppressing our thoughts. Rather, it is about choosing the right moment and the right approach. It allows us to reflect on our intentions, assess whether criticism is necessary, prevent harm, and offer feedback more thoughtfully. Silence can also create space for the other person's growth, reduce the potential for conflict, and foster empathy and understanding. In the end, the act of withholding criticism can be far more powerful and constructive than speaking without consideration. In today's world, it is easy to form quick judgments based on limited information. We are constantly bombarded with snippets of other people's lives, whether through social media, word of mouth, or mere observation. These surface-level glimpses can lead us to believe we know everything about a person or a situation. However, when we rush to judgment without having all the facts, we often misinterpret the truth and cause unnecessary harm. This is why silence, especially in moments when we don't have all the facts, can be one of the wisest responses. When we don't have all the facts, it's tempting to make assumptions. We might look at a situation, notice certain details, and jump to conclusions about what is happening or why something is occurring. However, without the full context, these assumptions are often based on incomplete or inaccurate information. In these moments, silence provides us with the opportunity to step back and refrain from acting on our limited knowledge. It allows us to avoid making a judgment that could be unfair or misplaced. When we remain silent, we give ourselves the time to gather more information and develop a more accurate understanding of the situation before speaking. Rushing to conclusions without all the facts can also lead to misunderstandings, which can cause unnecessary tension and conflict. For example, imagine overhearing a conversation and assuming you know exactly what was meant, only to later find out that your interpretation was completely wrong. This misunderstanding can lead to hurt feelings, damaged relationships, or even unnecessary arguments. Silence, in this case, serves as a protective measure. It allows us to avoid reacting impulsively to something we don't fully understand. By remaining quiet, we give ourselves time to process the situation and wait for more clarity before we respond or take action. Moreover, silence in these situations can help preserve our reputation. When we speak out of turn without all the facts, we risk looking uninformed or judgmental. People tend to respect those who think before they speak and who take the time to gather all the necessary information before offering an opinion. By choosing silence when we don't have all the facts, we demonstrate thoughtfulness and maturity. It shows that we are aware of the limitations of our knowledge and are not quick to make baseless claims. This level of self-awareness not only helps us avoid misjudgments, but also strengthens our credibility in the eyes of others. Silence also gives us the opportunity to listen more actively. When we don't have all the facts, it is important to stay open to new information. If we speak too soon, we may close ourselves off to the possibility of understanding the full scope of the situation. By remaining silent, we allow the other person to provide additional details, share their perspective, and clarify any misunderstandings. This listening process can provide us with the missing pieces of the puzzle and help us arrive at a more accurate understanding of what is truly going on. Silence, therefore, becomes a tool for learning and growth, helping us to develop a more nuanced and informed view of the world around us. Another significant benefit of silence, when we don't have all the facts, is that it helps us avoid contributing to the spread of misinformation. In the age of social media, where rumors and unverified information can spread like wildfire, it is essential to be cautious about what we say and share. If we speak without knowing the full truth, we may unintentionally contribute to the spread of false information or create unnecessary drama. Silence in this sense acts as a safeguard against the harm that can be caused by speaking prematurely. It encourages us to pause, question our assumptions, and seek out reliable sources of information before making any statements that could have a negative impact. Furthermore, silence in these situations demonstrates emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage our emotions as well as the emotions of others. When we withhold judgment and refrain from speaking without all the facts, we are showing self-control and empathy. We recognize that not all situations are as straightforward as they may seem, and that everyone has their own story. By being silent, we give ourselves time to process our emotions and reactions before responding. This self-awareness allows us to approach the situation with a clear mind, free from the bias or rush of judgment that often comes from incomplete information. Lastly, silence in the face of uncertainty can lead to better decision-making. When we are in a position to make a decision based on limited information, it is easy to make a snap judgment that may not be the best choice in the long run. Silence offers us a chance to pause, reflect, and consider all possible outcomes before taking action. It provides the mental space needed to assess the situation from different angles, gather more information, and make a decision that is based on a fuller understanding. By remaining silent and not acting impulsively, we give ourselves the best chance to make well-informed choices that are more likely to lead to positive results. In conclusion, silence in situations where we don't have all the facts is an invaluable tool. It allows us to avoid making premature judgments, preserve our reputation, and listen more effectively. It provides the opportunity for learning and growth, helping us to gather more information and arrive at a clearer understanding of the situation. Silence also prevents the spread of misinformation and demonstrates emotional intelligence, as we manage our reactions with self-control and empathy. In the end, choosing silence when we lack the full picture not only protects us from misjudging others, but also helps us make better decisions, foster stronger relationships, and become more thoughtful and informed individuals. In the course of our interactions, we often feel the need to prove ourselves, to show that we are right, that our opinions matter, or that we have the answers to everything. It can be tempting to speak out in situations where we feel a need to assert our knowledge or establish our position. However, not every situation demands that we prove ourselves. Sometimes the wisest choice is to remain silent, even when we believe we are right. Choosing silence in these moments can offer numerous benefits, fostering peace, strengthening relationships, and encouraging mutual understanding. The first reason why silence can be powerful in situations where we don't need to be right is that it allows us to avoid unnecessary conflict. There are many situations where, even though we may have a valid point, insisting on proving our correctness can create unnecessary tension or friction. In arguments or debates, the desire to be right often leads to heightened emotions and defensiveness. The more we insist on our perspective, the more the other person may feel compelled to defend theirs, and before we know it, what was once a simple discussion has turned into a full-blown conflict. By choosing silence instead of engaging in a battle of wills, we prevent the conversation from escalating into an argument. Silence allows the other person to express themselves fully, and it creates an opportunity for more constructive dialogue later on, without the pressure of proving who is right. Moreover, silence helps to promote humility. No matter how sure we are of our stance, it is important to remember that we don't always have the full picture. Even when we feel confident that we are correct, there is often more to the situation than meets the eye. By remaining silent, we acknowledge that our perspective is not the only valid one, and we leave room for the possibility that we might not have all the answers. This humility fosters a more open-minded and collaborative approach to communication. Instead of dominating the conversation or trying to prove a point, silence creates space for mutual respect and learning. By not feeling the need to be right, we open ourselves up to the possibility of growth and greater understanding. Silence can also demonstrate a level of emotional maturity. When we choose not to argue or assert our correctness, we show that we are capable of controlling our emotions and reactions. In situations where we might feel frustrated or challenged, it can be difficult to hold back and refrain from asserting our point of view. However, choosing silence in these moments demonstrates self-discipline and emotional intelligence. It shows that we can listen with an open mind and engage in conversations without the need to validate ourselves constantly. Emotional maturity is about recognizing that relationships and conversations are not always about winning or proving a point, but about fostering understanding and connection. Silence is a way of demonstrating that we value the conversation itself more than our own ego. Additionally, silence can promote better communication. When we feel compelled to prove ourselves, we often focus more on formulating our next response than truly listening to the other person. This can result in misunderstandings, as we are not fully engaged in what the other person is saying. By choosing silence, we are forced to listen more attentively and absorb what the other person is communicating. In doing so, we not only gain a deeper understanding of their perspective, but also show respect for their opinion. When we refrain from speaking solely to prove a point, we create space for more thoughtful, meaningful exchanges. This leads to conversations that are less about winning and more about understanding and collaboration. In addition, silence in moments where we don't need to be right can preserve the peace. Many conflicts arise from a need to be heard or validated, and when both parties insist on proving their point, they can become entrenched in their positions. However, when we choose to remain silent, we shift the focus away from our own need to be validated and instead allow the other person to be heard. This creates an environment where mutual respect and cooperation can flourish, and it encourages the other person to reflect on their own views. Silence in this way can be a form of diplomacy, helping to maintain harmony and reducing the potential for conflict. It shows that we are willing to let go of the need to be right for the sake of the relationship, creating space for empathy and understanding. Moreover, silence can help us avoid the trap of pride and arrogance. The need to always prove we are right can stem from an inflated sense of self-importance, where we feel that our opinion must be acknowledged and validated. However, this kind of attitude can quickly alienate others, as it leaves little room for differing perspectives. When we choose silence, we are practicing restraint and humility, recognizing that we are not always the authority on every matter. This allows for a more egalitarian approach to conversations, where everyone's opinion is valued and no one feels silenced or disregarded. By putting aside our own desire to be right, we demonstrate that we are willing to learn from others and appreciate their contributions. Finally, silence in these situations can strengthen relationships. When we choose not to argue or prove ourselves right, we create space for deeper connection. Relationships are not built on who is right or wrong, but on mutual respect and understanding. By choosing silence when it's not necessary to prove a point, we show that we care more about the relationship than about winning the argument. This fosters trust and goodwill, as both parties feel heard and respected. Silence, in this way, can be a tool for nurturing and deepening relationships, as it shifts the focus from competition to collaboration. In conclusion, choosing silence in moments when we don't need to be right can lead to more harmonious, respectful, and productive interactions. It allows us to avoid unnecessary conflict, promotes humility and emotional maturity, fosters better communication, and strengthens relationships. By letting go of the need to constantly assert our correctness, we create space for understanding, growth, and mutual respect. Silence, when chosen thoughtfully, is a powerful tool that can help us navigate the complexities of communication with grace and wisdom. In the midst of a difficult or painful situation, we often feel compelled to share our emotions with others, seeking validation, sympathy, or simply a sense of relief. While expressing our feelings can sometimes be helpful, there are moments when it is wiser to remain silent. When we are overwhelmed by negative emotions or facing personal challenges, it can be tempting to open up immediately. However, speaking out of emotional distress without considering the timing or impact of our words can lead to unintended consequences. In these moments, choosing silence allows us to process our feelings more effectively and prevents us from saying things we may later regret. One of the primary reasons silence can be valuable during emotional distress is that it helps us avoid saying things we don't mean. When we are upset, angry, or hurt, our emotions can cloud our judgment, leading us to speak impulsively. In these moments, we may say things that are exaggerated, harsh, or simply not true. These words, once spoken, cannot be easily retracted, and they can cause lasting damage to relationships. Silence gives us the opportunity to step back from the intensity of our emotions and reflect before we speak. It provides a space where we can calm ourselves, think more clearly, and ensure that our words align with our true feelings rather than being dictated by temporary emotional states. Silence in times of emotional distress also allows us to process our emotions internally. When we are upset, it can be difficult to understand exactly why we feel the way we do. Our emotions can be complex, and speaking too soon can prevent us from fully grasping the underlying causes of our distress. By remaining silent, we give ourselves time to reflect on the situation and our feelings. This self-reflection enables us to gain clarity and perspective, which ultimately leads to a more measured and thoughtful response when we are ready to speak. Silence allows us to separate the immediate emotional reaction from the deeper feelings, helping us understand the true source of our distress and how best to address it. Furthermore, silence can be a form of self-care. When we are overwhelmed by negative emotions, we may feel the need to share our troubles with others in order to feel supported. While this is a natural impulse, it is important to recognize that constantly seeking validation or sympathy can sometimes exacerbate our feelings. In these instances, silence allows us to take a step back and focus on our own well-being. It gives us the space to manage our emotions independently, without relying on others for reassurance or comfort. This form of emotional self-sufficiency can be empowering, as it encourages us to process our feelings on our own terms before seeking external support. Choosing silence in moments of emotional distress can also protect our relationships. When we are upset, we may direct our emotions toward the people closest to us, even if they are not the cause of our distress. In these moments, our words can be unfairly hurtful, and we may unintentionally damage the trust and connection we have with others. By remaining silent, we prevent ourselves from projecting our emotions onto others in ways that could harm the relationship. Silence allows us to cool off and avoid saying things that might cause unnecessary tension or resentment. It gives us the time to collect our thoughts, ensuring that when we do express ourselves, we can do so in a way that is respectful and constructive. Additionally, silence allows others the opportunity to offer support in their own way. When we speak immediately after a distressing event, we may unintentionally place the burden of our emotions on others, expecting them to respond in a certain way. This can create pressure, especially if the other person is unsure how to help or if they are struggling with their own emotions. By choosing silence, we allow the other person the time to process the situation and respond in a way that feels right for them. It creates an environment where both parties can communicate more effectively and understand each other's needs. Silence in this sense can promote healthier and more balanced relationships, as it removes the expectation that others must immediately provide emotional support. Silence can also prevent us from spiraling further into negative thinking. When we are upset, we may become fixated on the situation or person that has caused us distress. Speaking too soon can reinforce these negative thoughts and emotions, keeping us stuck in a cycle of anger, frustration, or sadness. Silence, on the other hand, allows us to detach from the immediate emotional reaction and gain some distance from the situation. This distance can provide a fresh perspective, enabling us to see things more clearly and to avoid getting trapped in negative thought patterns. By holding back in moments of distress, we give ourselves the opportunity to break free from emotional turbulence and find a path toward resolution and healing. Moreover, silence in times of emotional distress can promote personal growth. When we choose not to speak impulsively, we allow ourselves the time to develop emotional resilience. It encourages us to confront our emotions head-on and learn how to navigate difficult feelings without relying on external validation or distractions. This practice of emotional restraint can help us build inner strength as we become more adept at managing our emotions in a healthy and constructive way. Over time, this ability to remain silent in times of distress can enhance our emotional intelligence, allowing us to respond to challenging situations with greater calm and wisdom. In conclusion, silence during moments of emotional distress is a powerful tool for managing our feelings and protecting our relationships. It prevents us from saying things we might regret, allows us to process our emotions more effectively, and provides space for self-reflection and clarity. Silence can be an act of self-care, helping us to manage our emotions independently and avoid placing undue pressure on others. It also fosters healthier relationships by giving us time to cool off before speaking, ensuring that our words are thoughtful and respectful. Ultimately, silence in these situations enables us to approach our emotions with greater maturity, promoting personal growth and emotional resilience. By embracing silence, we give ourselves the opportunity to heal and respond with greater wisdom and compassion.